Ahora es como es la cosa.
No soy fácil, Ricardo.
Beneath these gauze sheets, protected from the sun and wind, grows Cuba's most precious commodity, tobacco. For the past 3 months, the workers at the Cooperative in the province of Pinar del Rio have tended and nurtured their beloved tobacco plants. It's the end of February, traditionally the main harvest season.
But as I know, oh, that's wonderful. Cigars are here. Thank you very much. I'm going to take a Cohiba.
Best part of the meal, one might say.
The fine and distinguished patrons of London's gentlemen's clubs are waiting eagerly for their postprandial treat, a Havana, the consummate Cuban cigar, and for many, the climax of the menu.
We have a cigar restaurant where we just start with a linear move through courses.
Thank you.
Thank you, my lord.
That's terrific. Monte Cristo #2.
I do think in England you get the best cigar service.
A toy men can suck at for hours without fear of reproach, a socially acceptable form of regressive indulgence.
Very well trained.
London's West End, home to the most distinguished and traditional of London's gentlemen's clubs, in close proximity to the Queen Mother herself. The corner of St James's in Piccadilly, a bastion for connoisseurs of good food, tailor-made suits, handmade shoes, rifles and colonialism. London also lays claim to being the cigar capital of the world, and can even boast a monument erected in honour of tobacco. A benevolent Queen Victoria can be seen receiving a gift of the weed's leaves from a loyal subject of the New World. Sir Walter Raleigh, the first English smoker. His servants thought he was about to suffer internal combustion.
I forgot to tell you that this technique of covering the tobacco was created in Cuba and was put into effect by Louis Marx, not to be confused with Karl Marx, who was German. Now I'm going to explain the way of harvesting tobacco on this plant, which is fully grown, approximately 70 days old. The life cycle of tobacco is 85 days, and there are 7 pickings. We start with the first leaves at the bottom, which we call libre de pie, prime ligeros, segundo ligeros, centro fino, centro gordo, and the last 2 are the coronas. Thinners and binders are cultivated in other places where no cloth is in use, under the open sky, and where tobacco is produced for the binder and the filler, the internal part of a cigar.
St James's Street, the sacred shrine for all Havana devotees, drawing pilgrims from royal palaces, cabinet offices and multinational boardrooms. And they're joined by many nameless cigar connoisseurs who've also succumbed to the seductive aroma of the blue smoke. In the past, female clients, who made no secret of their indulgence, would doubtless have caused an embarrassing scandal among the upstanding merchants.
Don't want to spend more than about £8 or £10.
Those are $6.40 each. That's the Corona size. That's this size here. I've got packets of 5 Monte Cristo.
Welcome to my office. I'm John Crowley of Robert Lewis, the oldest cigar merchant in London. We're now over the 200 years of age, so we think we have a fair knowledge of Havana cigars in which we specialize. I have been here myself just over 50 years, during which time, of course, I have seen many changes in the trade generally, the type of customer, and also the type of cigar. For instance, when I first started here, no gentleman would ever carry a parcel. He'd have his butler or a servant in tow to carry his parcels for him.
Yet the true maker of the Havana cigar is in the Cuban province of Pinar del Rio. The Hoyo de Monterrey plantation lies on the outskirts of the town San Juan y Martinez. The last decades have seen many changes. The servants are all gone, yet no one regrets their loss.
When I was 15, I used to make my own small cigars and went working in the fields. What I prefer to smoke are the Corona leaves and the Centro Gordo from the top. That's my favorite. Is it good? Oh, yes. Since I was 7 years old, I've been working with tobacco. Is it as good as ever? Well, it's hard to say it's this way or that way, because everybody grows tobacco in the same way, but it's still not the same, you know. Has it always been like that? No, it hasn't. Because in the old days, if someone said, "I'm going to grow tobacco," he really meant it. Nowadays, everybody grows tobacco. In the past, it was a selective practice, done only by people who knew their business. Do you think it's better today? Better? Of course. For the people, anyway, it's better.
Cuba, 1929. Although the nature of the work on the plantations has changed little throughout the years, the distribution of ownership has. And today, it's not the feudal landlords who reap the benefits of cigar manufacture, but a broad section of the population. Most of the great Havana brands contain the secret of the legendary red soils of the Vuelta Abajo, the golden rectangle, where the finest tobacco in the world is cultivated, and Nicotiana dominates all aspects of life throughout the region. Nowadays, Cuba is more dependent upon its cigar export market for earning foreign currency than ever before. In order to overcome the severe economic crisis, private farmers have been working for years side by side with socialist cooperatives. They are primarily responsible for cultivating the tripa, or filler leaves, and the capote, or the binder leaf of the Havana cigar, as here in Viñales.
How old are you? 72. And how long have you been working with tobacco? Since I was 13 or 14. Well, I always worked in tobacco, and at the farm here. For many years, more than 50 or so years, since I was a little boy. How was the work in those days? Was it hard? Just like today. You always had to work. You had to work hard. Everybody who works on a farm has to work all day long, sometimes more, sometimes less. You only stop if it's raining. On our farm, we work like a cooperative, but we do it for ourselves. You mean privately? Yes. We had to pay rent for the land. How much? 140 pesos. A month? No, a year. And do you still have to pay, or do you now own the land? No, now we're members of the private farmers cooperative and only have to pay 25 or 30 pesos. A month? No, a year.
Lord Kinnard, you have your private stock here of cigars. How do you test it? How do you test the cigars?
Before I take some away, well, to start with, when I buy them, they're always a few years old. Michael Crowley sees to that. And then, as you see, I mean, they're kind enough to give me a cabinet, and they've got the humidifier, and when I come down and open the box, to start with, it's rather like wine. You take in things with your eye, with your palate, with your... when you swallow. It's instinctive. It doesn't take time, it's instinctive. And you look at the cigar and think, yes, that looks nice. And then you can feel it. Is it not too tight? Yes, no, not too loose. And generally the feel of the thing.
You prefer them dry?
Not too dry, but not too damp. And you can normally, like these ones, for instance, I've taken, you see, they've just got that, you can feel it just gives a little. Now, if it was dry, it would be not right. If it was damp, it would be soft. But if it's just that little bit of give at the one end and also the smoking end, and then sometimes they feel a little bit hard, but they smoke beautifully. It's all in the smoking. You've got to look at it, and you've got to smell it, and you've got to press it a little bit, but the proof is in the smoking.
This view is also shared by the test smokers at the Cohiba factory. The quality control is conducted regularly, and the test results are analysed and forwarded to the experts who prepare the actual blend of tobacco. Such is the arduous nature of this job that these continual smokers are granted more free time and more fresh air.
Ningún problema.
No, tiene bien el sabor y el tiro también, la combustibilidad, perfecto.
Ningún problema, tú.
No, si no está bien todo, si no, luego que la aspecto y todo. Ahora no tiene problema en el tiro en la combustibilidad, nada.
¿No tuviste problema?
Buena calidad fumada, por ejemplo.
Although not a test smoker, Simon Argevich is certainly a Havana devotee and an inveterate record breaker. He is keen to win a new entry in the Guinness Book of Records. His feat? Smoking 14 Havanas while whistling the tune of Smoke Gets in Your Eyes at the same time. He may not look the picture of elegance, but he is at least a world record holder. Here in the drying barn, the clappers or wrapper leaves are hung up for between 40 and 60 days. Exposed to a constant supply of mild, humid air, their appearance gradually changes and they take on their unique aroma. These women from a cooperative are removing the thick stems from the dried leaves. The women treat the leaves with the same loving care and attention that they'd give to a freshly ironed shirt.
Here we're in the fermentation department. When it comes here, the tobacco has a 22 or 23% moisture. We put it in piles to allow fermentation, a chemical process which eliminates the noxious properties which are harmful to man. It's also checked to see that the leaves smell good and have a uniform appearance. And we check the temperature of the tobacco. Here we're working on fillers and binders. They work on the wrappers elsewhere.
The leaves must be watched over constantly. The process of fermentation is like composting. A good nose is needed to check that things don't go too far. Otherwise, the result would be great for the garden, but not for cigars. Constant supervision continues while the leaves recuperate from the fermentation. Until 1810, the world's cigar monopoly was in the hands of the Spanish. Cuba was merely permitted to supply the tobacco, not to roll it. The cigar itself was manufactured largely in Seville. Even today, more Havanas are smoked in Spain than anywhere else in the world except Cuba. In Madrid alone, more blue smoke is puffed than in the whole of Northern Europe. And what better way to steady the nerves while haggling for a black market ticket to the next bullfight than smoking a Havana?
I smoke 2 cigars a day, one after lunch and one after dinner. Sometimes when I go out at night I smoke another one, 3 altogether. But I never smoke when I'm out on the streets. I never smoke driving a car. I smoke, like many other Spanish do, during a bullfight, which is barbaric because you don't savour the aroma or taste the cigar. But in Spain it's a very old custom. Bullfighting and cigar smoking go hand in hand. That means men go to the bullfight, and before the first bull comes out, they light up their first cigar. During a bullfight, I smoke 2 or 3 cigars. I smoke one which goes out, and then, you know, But smoking a cigar during a bullfight has nothing to do with smoking a good cigar. Because the most important thing while smoking a cigar is the flavour, the aroma, and in the bull ring it all gets lost. But it's part of the tradition. Everybody does it. And, for example, when a torero performs well, really well, and pleases everyone, they usually throw cigars into the ring. You've done so well, here you are. There are sometimes 30 or 40 cigars in the arena.
Despite London's claims to the contrary, the world's true cigar capital is, of course, Havana itself. Almost everybody smokes cigars here, whatever the time, whatever the place.
Bueno, otro viaje. Está bien, otro viaje cuando tenga... de Juanito, cuando quedó al final que Alberto cogió y se tomó unos tragos y se pasó de roca.
Nowadays, as in the past, the bundles of tobacco are still packed together in bales in the traditional way, and only natural material, such as the bark of palm trees and jute, is used. The tobacco is then left to mature for years until it's ready to be made into cigars. As the precious wrapper leaves must be sufficiently supple before they can be used for the cigar, they're moistened with water. The tiniest of drops could stain and ruin the leaf. Such is the concentration required that staff in this department are granted more work breaks than their colleagues. The leaves are stripped of their stems and separated, then sorted according to size, colour and texture. This is the only time that the leaves come close to a maiden's thighs, but not that close. Zino Davidoff, a name which used to be synonymous with the Havana cigar. This incongruous union between Cuba and a European entrepreneur prospered for nearly 25 years, but today the marriage is in ruins. Who brought most to it, and whether Davidoff made Havanas successful or Havanas made Davidoff successful, is an issue that will be discussed by cigar enthusiasts for years to come. From 1992 on, the Swiss-based cigar guru will make all his cigars elsewhere, so Cuba no longer makes them. But Havana's time-honored brands live on. Even the most stable partnership can blow up in your face. Now we witness the crucial moment in the life of a tobacco leaf. It is about to become a Havana. 3 varieties of filler leaves are needed: the Ligero, the Seco, and the Volado. The Ligero, aged for a minimum of 3 years, brings a full flavour to the cigar, with the lighter-tasting Seco leaf, rich in aroma. Then the Volado helps the cigar to burn. Different blends of these 3 leaves create the unique flavours of individual brands, prepared to their own recipes, which remain jealously guarded secrets.
En medio de una completa oscuridad, poco a poco y con infinitas preocupaciones bajó la escalera que tenía una franja de moqueta en medio y llegó a un corredor del piso bajo, alumbrado durante la noche con una lamparilla de cristal que pendía del techo. La señora no quiere que le ayude a
The
desnudar.
lectora or reader in the factory workshop of the Upman factory. When she's not reciting from the daily newspapers or from Castro's works, she reads from sentimental and romantic novels. In earlier times, workers were treated to the great works of world literature, such as Romeo and Juliet or the Count of Monte Cristo, which lent their names to the famous brands of Havana cigars. From 1865 onwards, the factory lectora was remunerated by the workers themselves. Today, the state pays. This idea originally stemmed from the Cuban prisons of the last century, where books were scarce and inmates plentiful.
Replicó. Apenas ha permanecido unos cuantos minutos en el salón. No era visita para mí, sino para vos.
The wrapper leaf, with its silky smooth texture, adds the final glorious appearance to the cigar. Since 1844, cigars have been handmade by highly skilled rollers, tosidores, at H. Upman. There are different grades of tosidores. It's hard enough to achieve the first, and many trainees never make it. To qualify to make cigars for export takes at least 5 years. Rolling this size of cigar, a Monte Cristo A, is a job for the top grade, which only a very few who have magic in their fingers ever attain. Now the cigar is almost fully dressed. All it needs is a cap. Using part of the same wrapper leaf, secured with a dab of natural vegetable gum, this intricate task is performed. A qualified tosidor makes up to 150 cigars a day.
During my years here, of course, we have been privileged to see very many famous people. Quite obviously, when one's talking cigars, Churchill immediately comes to mind. He bought his first cigars here in 1900, and the last box 1 month before he died, so he didn't do too badly, really. I had the pleasure of seeing him very many times in bed in the mornings, surrounded with his papers and cigar ash all round the bed. There and in the garden there was a very funny incident towards the summer before he died, when I was showing him a box of Romeo and Juliet in the garden with his secretary, Miss Pugh, who unfortunately dropped the box on the floor. Then you heard the Churchill roar. The poor woman fled in terror, and I was left not knowing quite what to do. I brought the box back and replaced it, which is one of the best things I ever did, because I have it on show here now.
Shortly thereafter, in North Africa, he showed again his determination to be with the soldiers, to whom he was good old Winnie. He was there when he was wanted, they said.
Churchill enjoyed nothing more than a Havana, in the desert or at sea.
The former naval person crossed the English Channel to France in the wake of Allied landings.
No matter what
Held
the
final
company.
strategy conferences with General Eisenhower.
Towards the end of his life, he even smoked himself, as it were, the Churchill from Romeo and Juliet.
More than any other, had become the symbol of victory.
La palabra Cohiba
The word Cohiba is of Cuban origin. It's the word Cuban natives use to describe the tobacco plant and its leaves. This has been investigated by several historians from Cuba, as well as from Santo Domingo and Haiti, who all agree on the point. Here, we can see the head of a Cuban native as a symbol of the Cohiba brand.
Una hoja de tabaco con la cabeza de un aborigen cubano en ella.
In Mexico's ancient Aztec civilization, tobacco consumption was a privilege reserved strictly for kings and priests, who used it as a medium to communicate with their gods.
En Cuba, los indígenas cultivaron el tabaco.
In Cuba, the natives cultivated tobacco, and in addition, they smoked it or inhaled it. There was a ritual or cult in taking the tobacco as a hallucinatory substance. Therefore, in the religious rituals of fortune-telling, tobacco was used to initiate dialogue between divinity and man in a very efficient way. On inhaling it, it produces a euphoric high, a kind of drug stimulation. When the Spanish came to Cuba and saw the native rituals, which they called El Rito de la Cohiba, from which comes the Cuban name for tobacco, Cohiba, they thought it was a thing of the devil. And for a long time they considered tobacco smoking as something evil, but soon tobacco conquered the European royal courts and conquered the conquerors.
The discovery of America, or as they say in Cuba, the encounter of two cultures, took place at 10 o'clock on the night of the 11th of October 1492, when Columbus spotted a light from the deck of the Santa Maria, land which he initially assumed to be India. In actual fact, he had landed on an island which he called San Salvador, and a few days later on Cuba itself. In his fevered quest for gold, Columbus failed to appreciate that the island's native heathens possessed a treasure far more precious and intoxicating, tobacco. At first just a case for the Inquisition, soon a huge export commodity to the Old World.
Estamos en el portal de la casa que construyó.
We're here on the veranda of a house which was built in 1910 by the Marchioness de Pina del Rio. Not really a house, rather a palace.
En el año 1968.
It was here in 1968 that we started to produce the famous Cohiba brand cigars. It's a brand of cigar which came after the Cuban Revolution, which means it's definitely a Cuban brand of cigar, as are the leaves we use today. These cigars are from the best plantations of the San Juan and San Luis valleys near Pina del Rio.
De San Juan y San Luis en Pinar del Río.
Cohiba was always something special. Only the women are permitted to roll these valuable cigars with the reddish wrapper leaf, much too precious for the coarse hands of men.
These tobacco leaves in my hand are undergoing a process of fermentation. It's these types of leaves, leaves of the Ligero class, which give the cigar its full flavour. They've already been in these barrels for 15 months and they're still not completely fermented. The process is very similar to the fermenting of wine.
Por eso le decíamos que es muy parecido al proceso de fermentación de los vinos.
At the Cohiba factory, they try to develop the art of cigar manufacture to perfection. This woman, for example, is sorting the cigars into 68 different colour shades.
El año pasado, en 1990,
in 1990, Cuba produced approximately 370 million units of cigars, of which some 80 million were exported, meaning 290 million were smoked here at home. That means, as you can see, the Cuban people are great smokers of Cuban cigars.
Como usted verá, el pueblo cubano es un gran fumador de puros habanos.
He who rules Cuba rules the Havana. Fidel Castro was the first Cuban head of state to publicly endorse one of the country's biggest export earners. However, on the advice of his Minister of Health, he has for the past 5 years remained abstinent.
Well, actually, what happened was, as you know, we went through the probably the biggest disaster in the Kennedy administration, which was the Bay of Pigs. And about a month after the Bay of Pigs, the president called me into his office around 5 o'clock in the afternoon. He said, "I really need some help." I said, "What do you want, Mr. President?" He said, "I need some cigars." The president smoked Cuban cigars. He smoked the Petit Upman, as I remember it. So I said, "Fine, how many do you need?" He said, 1,000. I said, "When do you need them?" He said, "By tomorrow morning." I said, "That's a very tough assignment, but I'll see what I can do." Anyway, I was smoking a lot of cigars myself in those days, so I contacted a lot of my stores, and next morning I got to the office at 8 o'clock, and the president was already ringing me from the Oval Office, "Come right in, come right in. How'd you do?" I said, "I did very well, Mr. President." "How many did you get?" "I got 1,200. "Fantastic." He opens up his desk drawer, and he pulls out the decree banning all Cuban products from the United States and signs it.
Fidel Castro begins a series of meetings in Moscow with the only man who can help bail out economically shattered Cuba. His visit to Russia is billed as a vacation, but it was obvious that Premier Castro came to get additional credit.
During Castro's numerous visits to his great brother nation, talks centred not only on the intrigues of their common enemy, the United States, but also on the question of what tasted better, a Havana cigar or a Soviet cigarette. Obviously, a short discussion.
Khrushchev is reported to dislike the smell of tobacco, but he presses the Russian cigar on Castro. Did he like it? Well, there's still censorship in Russia.
In 1962, I went to the Soviet Union for the first time, and I spent 2 days, 16 hours of head-to-head conversation with Nikita Khrushchev. And at the end of the conversation, he says, "Господин Salinger," he says, "I see you like cigars. And I don't like cigars. But I've just gotten a fabulous present from Fidel Castro, and I'm going to give it to you." So he waves the guy over, and a box comes, big wooden box, flag of Cuba encrusted in the top of it. I open it, and there are 250 glorious cigars. Oh. I said, "My God, what am I going to do?" Well, first of all, you think, I can't take those in the United States. It's illegal.
Right.
Then I thought, well, I'm traveling with a very special passport that says on a special mission for the President of the United States abroad. I can probably get through customs with that, so I took them. And I got back to Washington, and as soon as I got to Washington, the president called me in the office. He wanted to know what Khrushchev had told me. I said, "Listen, before we get down to this serious stuff, I made a real killing in Moscow." He said, "What?" I said, "I got us 250 great cigars." He said, "What?" I said, "Yeah, I got us 250 great Cuban cigars." He said, "Do you realize what the scandal that would be in this country if people found out about it?" He said, "How?" I said, "How are you going to find out about it? There are only 3 people who know, Khrushchev, you, and me." He said, No. You've got to get rid of these cigars, and you've got to go to the head of U.S. Customs and turn them over to him, and he's got to write a letter saying that he got them, because otherwise we're going to be in deep trouble." Well, I went to U.S. Customs. I gave the 250 cigars. I kept the box. The guy signed the letter. I'm walking out. I said, "What are you going to do with those cigars?" He said, "We're going to destroy them." I said, "I know, one by one."
I'm sitting here in the rehearsal room at the Deutsches Theater. Formerly, it was the rehearsal room of the Berlin Ensemble. Up there was one of Brecht's favourite places. A little log cabin was built for him. I remember when I first met Brecht, he smoked cigars during rehearsals, which he was allowed to do. I learned later he had special permission from the Ministry of Culture. He said if he wasn't allowed to smoke during rehearsals, he couldn't be creative. There always had to be somebody behind him with a bucket or an enormous ashtray.
Ich habe das auch nur gelesen. Es gab wohl einen Streit zwischen...
I once read that Brecht and Dürrenmatt must have quarrelled about who smoked the better cigars. I imagine their reason for quarrelling was that they didn't want to talk about who wrote the better plays, so it was about cigars. Dürrenmatt claimed he had convinced Brecht that Havana cigars were better. I don't think Brecht smoked Havana, but Brazil cigars. And later in life he preferred green cigars.
Cigars have long been in favour as props in the theatre, and even more so in films. Many famous actors have been well nigh addicted to Havana cigars, and highly delighted when the script has included plenty of cigar smoking scenes.
The Americans are what I call oblivious smokers. Oblivious smokers because they smoke in the streets. They smoke when driving a car. They don't have this European sense, which is more civilized, really. Smoking a cigar is like taking a break in the day. I sit here and for 3/4 of an hour or an hour, I smoke a cigar. I know a lot of people, friends of mine, actors, who smoked cigars, but they didn't smoke properly. For example, Orson Welles, who went down in history as a great cigar smoker, but he chewed his cigar, put it into the ashtray and picked it up again. That's no way to smoke a cigar. Winston Churchill was also a terrible cigar smoker. He had an outrageous habit. He ordered a coffee and a cognac, put the cigar into the cognac and then smoked the cigar. All he got was a cognac-flavoured cigar.
Bueno, hay quien dice que fumar un puro.
In Cuba, we have another habit. We also dip the cigar in something before we smoke it. We dip it into coffee or into rum. It doesn't matter. For instance, if you go to the beach and take a dip, you get wet. That's life.
I have the feeling that in London I have the opportunity to meet more experts than in Cuba. What do you think about that, gentlemen?
Well, we're the experts.
There was one Cuban colleague of mine who used to ask me to take cigars from England back to Cuba so that he could smoke them, because they had had the benefit of travelling across the ocean, of being treated in the way that we treat cigars in England, and it made sense for him to smoke cigars which had come from here.
Bueno, hay mucha gente que presume.
There are a lot of people who pretend to be the experts on cigars. For example, the British. The British say they're the ones who know most about cigars. It's just not true. The British smoke cigars, but they like very dry cigars. And the first thing they do when taking a cigar is this, to see how it sounds. If a cigar sounds, then it's dry and you shouldn't smoke it. A cigar has to be damp. There has to be a give at the point where you press it. It gives and it goes back to its natural shape. That's the right time to smoke it.
There
you are.
Yes, I've got them.
What have you got?
The usual.
Usual?
Yes.
Lady Kinnard, do you have any problems with cigar smokers at home?
Well, in some ways, yes, because they're not very good for the curtains, nor for the pictures, for that matter. But I like the aroma, so maybe that works both ways.
My wife loved it. I was once away for 6 weeks in America, and she said, "Thank God you're back. I missed the smell of the cigar."
Thank you.
Thank you very much, my Lord. Lady Kinnaird, nice to see you again.
Very nice to see you.
Sir?
See you next week.
I hope so. Look forward to it.
You got everything?
Yes.
Are you off to Scotland this weekend?
No, not this weekend.
No? You're staying in London?
Staying in London this weekend. Going up
couple of weeks' time. Right, lovely to see you. Okay. Goodbye, sir.
Ya, bueno, pero siempre cogí la voz.